it's coming, and it's time to build the Shift XT. I love this case. It's just so well made. The finish quality is great. And this will be great for you even if you've never built a PC up before. And hopefully you're getting yours or you got it already. So let's take a deeper dive into this one. And even if you're using different components, it's still going to be a similar build process. So, and I hope you've seen the review already. So this should give you a little more detail and insight, just so you can get an idea for the ins and outs of the case. So let's get started. Okay, let's start off with our motherboard. This is the B550-ITX motherboard. To start the build, let's just put the CPU in this latch, bring it up here, and we can grab our CPU. With Ryzen CPUs, the lettering will face the rear I/O side, so make sure it looks like that. All right, for an AIO, and here I'm showing you the Phanteks. This is an Asetek unit. Comes with these standoffs. You just need to thread these onto the motherboard into that back plate. And that's actually it, because later on, the pump along with this bracket is just gonna be put like that. All right, for the cables, let's dig in. This is the first one you'll pull out. This is the 24-pin ATX cable. This is cool. This is a combination SATA power and Molex power. You're gonna need this for powering the case's RGB or a 2.5-inch SSDs. So where this is more commonly used is something like a water pump for a custom loop. So if you're doing that, this terminates with the Molex power. That's kind of nice. Or otherwise you can just run this one, which is straight SATA power all around. This one here is and it'll say CPU. This is the EPS cable. This will plug straight onto your motherboard. This one's a duplicate. You only need one for a mini-itx board. Then lastly, grab these two. These will be for your GPU, a PCIe cable. So whether you're doing the liquid-cooled build or the air-cooled build, we're just gonna plug our cables onto the motherboard first. That way we don't have to get into as many tight spaces. So these are modular cables, so we can just plug them onto the motherboard. Grab your EPS cable, make sure this latch is going to be facing out. So we'll just pop that over here. 24-pin ATX cable will go right here. Make sure that clicks. Okay, and just check the gap. Should be nice and flush. Okay, that's in all the way. I'm not skipping ahead here, I just forgot to show a shot of the M.2. You'll basically remove the heatsink and then pop the drive in. Of course, you'll do this before you've got the cooler in, but I just took it out to show you how that goes into there. And then you'll put everything else on. And another thing I needed to mention, because the M.2 has a heatsink on it, this is like a ceramic heatsink, we can just put this on without the thermal pad, because otherwise it's going to put too much pressure on the drive. We'll be mounting our cooler for the air cooler because the access for the mechanism has to be from the back because it uses this back plate. So we'll go ahead and just put the thermal paste on right now. You can put some in the corners, the excess in the corners if you want. That's going to be enough. Alright, here's our air cooler. This is the heatsink for the IS60 Evo. Look at that, 6 heat pipes. There's usually a 92mm fan that goes on the underside. We don't really need that because we can run the one on top. I'm just going to go ahead and skip that because that one tends to be a little loud. Go onto the CPU just like this. And we'll just thread the screws in. These connect to the cooler on the other side. Star pattern. Okay, we're looking at the bottom of the case here. I'm just going to single out the cables you'll want to have ready. This is the USB-A header, the USB-C header, and this is the single front panel I/O connector. This is the power switch. All the other ones you can leave out for now. You may not even need them. This is the for a downstream device from the case's RGB controller. This is for a 3-pin or 5-volt RGB. And this one, if you want to connect to your motherboard to have your motherboard control the case's RGB, you can use this. This one is like a Phanteks connector. And the SATA power that we'll need to power the case's RGB. So we'll connect this to the power supply later. We're going to pop in the I/O shield at the back. And it is upside down because it's an inverted motherboard. Okay, just needs to be popped in. And then we can put our motherboard in. We're going to line up everything. Okay, pretty simple here. Let's just sort out our cables. This will connect to the power supply. We'll just set it aside here. Then we've got our front I/O cables. This was USB-C header cable. Make sure the arrow and this is aligned like this. That should just click in place. Okay, notch here. Make sure you have enough slack. And you gotta be careful because the pins gotta line up just right. Okay. Power switch is the two inside ones here. And if you don't know, just take a look at your motherboard, and your motherboard will come with a diagram and tell you where the power switch goes. All right. If you are connecting a SATA SSD, you can do that right now. Okay. To secure the motherboard, we'll use these M3 screws that are in the hardware bag, and we'll just pop 4 of them. One in each of the corners of the motherboard. And just tighten that down. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pop the riser cable in. This is PCIe Gen 4. So we're gonna just bend that forward. Make sure the slot is aligned and press down. Okay. You can lock in the riser cable. This is the piece that comes with the motherboard. Well, you're gonna take this end and latch it to the riser cable and just push the other end until it goes over the bottom of the motherboard. And that holds this in place. Sometimes these riser cables, they can come loose and then you won't get a graphic signal. And then you're like, nothing's working, and that's why. All right, quick check here. We've got the EPS cable in, ATX cable, the USB-A, USB-C, and the power switch all connected up. And I'm gonna route this CPU cable around just like that. And then these cables, they'll go up and over here because the power supply is gonna sit right here. Connect your cooler fans cable first. And I'm just gonna use an extension cable because this one, it terminates pretty close to the fan. That's the gray one there on this ASUS board. Fold up the excess here. That's a good way to do it. And we'll just, you know, kind of organize it underneath here. Since all that is organized now, we can just put in our RAM kit. You'll note that one side of this DDR4 kit is longer. There's more pins on this side than here. Longer side is over here, shorter side over here. Make sure your latches are open. And we'll just slide this in. Won't be any resistance there. Make sure it clicks. This is the T-Force Extreme White Kit ARGB. That's a nice looking one there. Okay. Let's just plug in a few cables that aren't connected to the motherboard yet. Okay, PCIe cable. And so we'll use one of these. We can use one of these. These are 16 gauge cables. And depending on your particular power supply, check it, because if it's 18 and you're running a 3080, I'd probably run 2 separate ones. These have 2 ends, and so this will just plug in. This will save us an extra little bit of cable to manage. The SATA power cable, you'll need this for the RGB and or a 2.5-inch SSD. You got all these here. Let's go to the one here. Okay. And so the other 2 cables we will plug in over here. And what I've done is I've routed these around the bottom through the side. And that'll keep this stuff in check here. Okay, the first one we want to run over here. It's going to be our CPU cable. Let's do the motherboard cable first, actually. Yep. And then this will come around. You got 2 pieces to connect here. Make sure that clicks in place. And then that EPS cable, just put over here, all right? And then you'll put the fan facing out for your SFX power supply or your SFX-L. And okay, that'll just sit right there. We'll clean it up, but we got to secure the power supply first. All right, turn this upside down here so you can get a good look here. Just screw these 4 in the corners. The bottom, super organized. You see with the cables already kind of pre-managed here. We'll just take this, the power cable, and plug that in. Make sure your power supply is on. That's really it. It's pretty simple. You can hook up the SATA power for the RGB. Go ahead and just take these together. And if you don't need this, the rest of this you can just tie back up here. At any point once you've connected all the cables, you can put your cooler fan on, because then that won't cover anything. And actually this case will fit with this heatsink a full 25mm fan. I've taken off the bumpers. This is the Noctua NFA 12x25 Chromax version. Very good 120mm fan, probably the best 25mm 120mm fan. And we'll just connect the cable up like this. And this cooler does come with its own cooler fan. It's a slim fan, but you'll need to source some longer M3 screws, just over 25mm, probably 27, 28mm. And then that will thread directly into the heatsink. If you want to leave this step to the very end, that's totally fine too. So it's not, there's no real, it's not imperative as long as you've done everything you need to do, because this is going to be a little harder to get the RAM in, for example. Okay, right here there is a strap that'll hold down the GPU cable. Let's open it up. You're going to want to fold in quite a bit of this cable, because, well, GPU's power port's right here. You can also use that to tuck in any extra cable here. And we can just eyeball it right now, because we'll see when we actually plug it in. We can always take in more cable at that point. Now we'll turn our attention to the GPU side. We're going to take out 2 slots, 2-slot GPU. If you need a third, just take out the third expansion slots. Okay, these covers, just put them somewhere safe if you ever need them in the future. Usually not. This is the riser cable. This is where the GPU will go. And so your PCIe connector here, these 2 will mate together. A couple pointers here, make sure that these will go into the case. You'll see 2 hooks over here. Let's just focus on that. See these hooks? Yeah, so this will go right into there. And then we'll just flip it this way and we'll tighten the card back down with the same hardware that you removed earlier. And now we can connect those power cables back to our card. Notice the latch. You'll want to align that with your card. Not all cards are the same. Some cards actually have the latch facing the other way, but you'll want to make sure that they can go in together. And usually you won't be able to plug the cable in anyway if it's facing the wrong way. Okay, so just make sure the cables are engaged all the way. And like I said earlier, we can kind of cinch these back up. Just flip it around. You can take in a little bit more cable here. Just tuck it under. Actually, it all comes together pretty nicely. The intent is for it to go vertically, but I kind of want to leave that open because this card, even though it doesn't have a significant flow through section, it still does. And there's going to be a little bit of, you know, having that little bit of air gap here instead of putting cables all up in there. That's going to be a little better. And this little RGB cable is totally fine too. So you can run a splitter cable right now, and that connects to your case fan headers, which, you know, if you want to do this, you could have connected it earlier too, but you just connect those cables up right here. Do it. Okay, and then this you can connect up to your top fans if you're going to run them. Even if you don't use it, you can just leave this splitter cable up here. So if you don't want to use it, no harm, no foul. And then that's on tight. So let's do a quick review here. Cooler fan, heatsink, everything is on. RAM's in. The USB-A, USB-C, the front panel power switch, the motherboard cables we all connected when the motherboard was outside, and we just back channeled it to the power supply. Riser cable in, and this one has that lock, so make sure it's firmly in there. And then graphics card is in. Power cables are connected. So we're ready to close this thing up, but and optionally, we can put this into configuration too, and that'll involve the use of 2 case fans at the top, which I actually highly recommend it given the thermal needs for this 3080. And the CPU cooler it's mostly okay for the Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 5 level of CPU, but when you have this big of a GPU dumping all its heat into the case, and that heat is kind of just sitting in here without a direct path to exit, it really helps to have those case fans. So I will show you how to do that. It's completely optional, and then actually we'll finish off and I'll show you how to do the AIO as well. Fans are actually going to sit on top of here. So that's where that's going to go. Okay, if you want to run it without the top fans, that's fine. You can just put the case back together. Now, I'm actually going to recommend to run those fans because with this hot of a GPU and no top fans, it's going to get really, really hot with all that heat being dumped into the case. So what we're going to do is just pop these 2 T30s on top. And to do that, you can just take the top panel off. And then what we'll do is just screw these fans in, and we'll want to run it as an exhaust. So just make sure that the fan is pointing in the correct direction. They don't have to be these T30s, they just happen to be the ones made by Phanteks that are really high performing. Plus you only get 2, so we'll do that. And we'll just connect the cable to the splitter cable we ran earlier. And then just screw the panel back on. See, it's a little bit tight to slide the dust filter on, but it'll clear that fan just fine. It can spin just fine, and I'll show you how you can tell. You slide it up here and just give that a spin, right? No problem. Just make sure that the dust filters do go, in fact, all the way down here. All right. Depending on what height you want the case at, you put the standoff in the side. Position 2 is air boost. That'll be what we're going to be showing right now. And that'll just, you can kind of take this off here. But that'll just require swapping the standoff to the middle position. Okay, so pretty quick, just take a screwdriver. The case actually comes with a little screwdriver, you can use that. And then we'll take this piece over here. This is the intermediate sized spacer. And then we'll just pop it at the back here. Okay. Okay, like that. Okay, for doing this as an AIO build, so you'll see I've got the rad plate back on. I'm routing the rad through like this, barbs on this end. We'll put the fans on it all at the same time. We do want to get this secured first. You can do it either way, but we'll get the pump head on there first, because then we won't have this tube kind of wobbling around here. So I'll flip it over. And this is an Phanteks unit. So we've got the AM4 plate on here. We're going to run the barbs this way. Before we mount the unit, we're going to plug the power onto the AIO pump header. This is going to usually be the one in the middle. And then we can just line up here. Okay. Your unit will come with these and you'll just use these to secure the pump head down. So we'll just hand tighten, and then we'll come back with a screwdriver and mount it down firmly. And you do want to alternate in a star pattern. Come on away. Okay, and that's nice and tight. So now we'll turn our attention over to the radiator. So our fans, they'll be in an exhausting position. Just kind of manage the tubing a little bit first. And I'm gonna run these like so. Okay. So they'll go like this. There's a 30mm T30s. Very powerful combo here. Okay, and you will need to then take the rad screws, and then we'll put them through the unit, and I'll show you just swinging it out. All right, so it's a little bit of a juggling exercise. Put the rad fans on. What I'm gonna do is just position this in place, and then you'll take your screws and just pop them through the rad plate, and make sure you can align into the rad itself. Okay. You don't have to tighten it down yet, just make sure they're engaged properly. Hand tight is good. Or you don't even hand tighten it, just gotta engage some threads here. My preference would be to leave it a little loose right now until we figure out the best position for the whole unit. And so if you've gone ahead and gotten all the screws placed, then we can start that adjustment process. All right, so this seems like a good position here. What you're looking for is to just make sure that the tubing can still, it's not bent at a sharp angle. And this case does have a good amount of clearance, so even though the tubing sticks out a little bit like that, that's okay. And what we do is we can just kind of tighten down all the screws. And you don't have to over tighten these, because it's not really going to move anywhere. Just make sure they're snug. Okay. And this plate makes it pretty easy to access what's underneath. Okay, one thing to do before we lock it all down is just check, and you're going to spin your fans, make sure that nothing is interfering with it, otherwise make a little adjustment. And we'll just check here. It's actually pretty easy to do that because of the swing mechanism here. Just give them a little bit of a spin. you're listening for. See, there's a little bit of interference. That means that tubing needs to be fine-tuned here, just a little bit lower. And that way, you don't have any surprises when you power on the system. Okay, so everything sounds like it's spinning freely now. Then we can lock it all down. Then you can just make sure you connect that fan cable, however you need, back to the CPU fan header. And then we can put the magnetic cover on here. Alright, because we're using a Phanteks unit, we can actually just connect this RGB cable. It's from the magnetic cover here. And then that'll allow the case's RGB controller to control our pump head too. Okay, so we'll just do a little cable management, and then you just pop this on like this. Okay, so that's clicked in place here. And you can tidy up this cable here. And so we'll just make sure we have the large spacer here and that you've positioned the standoffs to position 3. And then this will go back on top. So this will just slide on and you'll give that a good latch, right? Secure to the bottom. Just make sure that the notched outside faces the front of the case, right? Because otherwise it won't clear. And then right now with that top panel on, we'll just go ahead and push the latches back out. That'll lock it in place. You can put the front I/O panel at the bottom here. And so this will slide up and down depending on if you want to access your front I/O or not. Really cool. And then the magnetic plate. Put that thumb screw back in to the bottom. It's a little bit bulky here. You could use a 632 rad screw here instead and just use that. But that's it. I think the build's complete. And then when you're all done, it should look like this. This is the configuration 3. This is the AIO build. Okay. Some of you have asked about this configuration, and I think this would be really, really cool as long as you can access from the bottom side. But hey, go enjoy your Shift XT any way you like it. And I hope that build guide was easy enough to follow. So please let me know if there's any feedback you have on these tutorials. I always try and improve them. Product links are down below. Please give a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.